Hello there. Are you tonight feeling the pull of sleep, but your mind insists on reenacting every awkward moment since childhood? Worry not, let me guide you into slumber with the soothing tale of mud-caked heroism and frostbitten resilience. In a land where wool was currency and turnips were considered festive, the medieval peasant faced winter like an unpaid intern faces deadlines, with layers of desperation and faint hope. No dragons, no knights, just a soggy shoe, a sputtering fire, and the dream of surviving till spring without hugging a goose for warmth. So, tuck yourself in, grab a stale crust of bread, and let this story of chilled toes and emotional porridge cradle you gently into dreamland. Listening to the whisper of wind clawing at your window, the sound medieval peasants knew all too well, the season announcing itself like a cold landlord demanding rent in frost and despair. By mid-November, autumn's weak attempt at cheer had crumbled into soggy leaf piles and half-hearted sunsets. The fields, once golden with wheat and reluctant optimism, now resembled graveyards for dreams and hoed rows. Peasants stared at the sky with the resigned wisdom of people who understood that clouds weren't. Families prepared with what they had: prayers, root vegetables, and that one ratty cloak everyone swore used to be nicer. The local blacksmith, who doubled as village philosopher, declared, "This'll be a long one," every year, regardless of meteorological evidence. He was respected for it. Children ran barefoot through slush because shoes were a springtime luxury. The mud, ever loyal, returned with gusto, invading boots, bed linens, and emotional boundaries. The turnips were harvested and stared at as if they'd volunteer for dinner plans. No such luck. And so, winter arrived, not with fanfare or snowflake poetry, but with the bone-deep certainty that the next few months would be a slow waltz with discomfort. The sky became a sheet of wet wool. The sun clocked out early, and the peasants, stoic in their smoky huts, simply tightened their belts and waited. For in these cold days, surviving was less a heroic feat and more a long series of, well, we didn't die today. Peasant homes resembled misplaced garden sheds, built not for comfort, but for the art of enduring. Their walls, crafted from wattle and daub, appeared determined to let the wind participate in family life. Roofs were a thrilling gamble, usually made of thatch, which doubled as birdhousing and occasionally collapsed out of spite. The hearth burned sullenly in the center, offering heat at the speed of regret. Smoke curled lazily into the room, reminding everyone of lungs they hadn't used properly in weeks. Windows were more theoretical than functional small holes, plugged with oiled linen that flapped in the breeze like damp promises. Light entered only if invited, and even then, only during business hours. Nighttime warmth came from proximity. Parents, children, and livestock slept tangled like the world's least relaxing jigsaw puzzle. Privacy had long surrendered to the cause of survival. Arguments about blanket rights were settled via silent foot wars under shared quilts. On stormy nights, the house groaned in solidarity. Rats scurried between beams and toes. The wind recited poetry from the cracks in the walls, melancholic verses about the joys of being somewhere else. If a dwelling could be proud, it was proud of not falling down. Yet somehow, it became the quiet fortress of peasant persistence, a place for snoring, soup, and stories whispered in the language of low expectations. Fashion in the medieval peasant world was less a choice and more a negotiation with fabric. Every morning was a tactical decision. How many tunics can one wear before resembling a mobile haystack? Wool was the textile of survival lychee, damp-resistant, and gifted with the remarkable ability to host flea families across generations. Undergarments were rare, making the concept of chafing deeply personal. The base layer was often a linen shirt handed down from an uncle who may or may not have wrestled a pig in it. Over that came wool tunics, cloaks, aprons, and occasionally sacks with holes cut in optimistic places. Fleas nested like entitled guests, immune to eviction. They attended family gatherings, slept in the folds of every sleeve, and expressed their presence through interpretive itching. Delousing was a hobby, a bonding experience, and a lost cause. Some believed fleas possessed souls. Others suspected they were just very determined. Peasants knew that every layer added insulation, not just from the cold, but from dignity. Mobility declined with each article. Turning around too fast might dislodge a sleeve or a minor child. Still, clothing was a treasured arsenal. A patched-up cloak could spark envy. A new pair of socks warranted celebration. The village cobbler was spoken of in reverent tones, despite his habit of mumbling at shoes. Winter fashion was not elegant, it was emotional, and every scratch, every shifting tunic fold, reminded peasants that warmth came not from silk, but from stubborn wool and lowered expectations. Winter meals in medieval peasant households were like attending a funeral for taste. Each bowl of stew whispered, "You'll be seeing this again tomorrow." Ingredients were consistent: turnips, dried beans, garlic if someone was lucky, and water that may or may not have been rinsed with a boot first. Meat was rare and deeply ceremonial. A salted herring could spark tears. Pigeon was an unpredictable delicacy, often chased down during moments of emotional weakness. Anything edible was considered soup-worthy, including questionable mushrooms and remorseful cabbage. Grain supplies dwindled with theatrical tension. Barley and oats were hoarded like secrets. Bread became dense, dark, and philosophically dry, less a meal, more an edible question mark. Those fortunate enough to own a flour sack often slept with it, kissed it goodnight, and spoke gently to it. Ale flowed cautiously. It doubled as hydration and vague entertainment. Peasants didn't drink to forget, they drank to slightly blur the sensation of root vegetables. Water, untreated and mysterious, was accepted with quiet negotiation. Spices were rumors. Pepper was a myth told by traveling monks who smelled of foreign temptation. And yet, despite the taste profiles resembling melancholy and boiled indecision, food gave comfort, not in flavor, but in rhythm. Stew, bread, ale repeat until the snow melted or personal identity dissolved. As the frost clenched the earth and the days faded into gray sameness, medieval peasants found themselves trapped in a bitter season, not just of cold, but of quiet despair, with limited light, scant warmth, and the brutal monotony of survival tasks. The human need for distraction and connection flickered like the flame of their dwindling hearths. Grim amusements. Storytelling became an essential escape. Elders spun tales of saints, devils, lost travelers, and tragic lovers. These weren't just for pleasure, they were communal lifelines, keeping morale afloat. Puppet shows using rags and sticks offered bizarre, comic relief. The characters often mocked landlords, priests, and winter itself. giving peasants permission to laugh at their own hardship. Singing specially lamenting ballads was common, not because voices were beautiful, but because grief demanded an outlet. Quiet crafts of the cold peasants carved bone or wood, creating charms to ward off frost, demons, or spirits said to lurk in snowy fields. These objects served no practical purpose, but their creation gave hands something to do and minds something to believe in. Embroidery and mending became slow, meditative rituals. Not every stitch was necessary. Sometimes peasants embroidered secret names into their garments, or symbols for lost family members. Melancholy and superstition, depression, was not a word they had, but they knew its shape. The winter madness was blamed on spirits, bad air, or weak faith. Some believed their dreams could be influenced by what they ate before sleeping. Mush, made with bitter herbs, could invite visions of spring gore, banish nightmares of wolves and famine. The fire, as theater families gathered around fires like a stage. Shadows on the wall became the night's performers, and children would invent scary tales inspired by the flickering silhouettes. Occasional dramatic reenactments of biblical scenes, especially the suffering of martyrs, brought sobering reflection, or the kind of catharsis that made people cry without knowing why. In the frozen embrace of medieval winter, religion remained a steadfast cornerstone. But attending church was not merely a spiritual act, it was an endurance trial. Stone chapels turned into icy echo chambers, and faith was tested not only by hardship, but by hypothermia, the ice-cold cathedral experience. Churches weren't heated. The stone walls trapped cold air like crypts, and breath hung in visible clouds as congregants murmured prayers. Parishioners stood for hours, shifting weight from foot to frostbitten foot. Kneeling on frozen flagstones was seen as penitential and occasionally medicinal, if numbness counted as relief. Ceremonies in slow motion. Masses moved at glacial pace. Priests wore layered robes that whispered with frost. Their words competed with the crackling of joints and the occasional sneeze that echoed like thunder. Incense, meant to lift the spirit, also served the accidental function of masking the damp. Moldy scent of cloaks that hadn't dried since October. Faith as frostbite. Some villagers believed the cold was purifying, that enduring a freezing sermon counted for double in heaven's eyes. The more chilblains you earned, the more saintly your soul. A few zealous monks bathed in icy water before prayer, insisting that shivering brought them closer to divine suffering, divine distractions. Children fell asleep in piles of cloaks, occasionally kicked awake for unruly snoring. Dogs sneaked into chapels, offering heat and distraction. Their presence was tolerated. The church bell froze to its clapper, leading one inventive sexton to whack it with a shoe, until it rang out like a dull sigh. Holy days and harrowing nights. Midnight masses in December drew crowds desperate for any excuse to gather, even if it meant braving the deathly chill. The ritual became more about community survival than divine revelation. Despite the chill, the church offered something rare: structure, solace, and the illusion of timeless order amidst endless gray. It wasn't just religion, in the unforgiving frost of medieval winter, ingenuity wasn't a luxury, it was life-saving. Peasants wielded an arsenal of mismatched tools that would made a blacksmith wince and a modern farmer weep. Yet from the cracked and crooked, they carved out survival. Buckets that could barely bucket, Wooden buckets leaked like gossip in a village tavern. Peasants lined them with animal fat or scraps of fabric to keep water in or at least delay its escape. Water froze overnight, so these buckets were often used more like ice transporters, chiseled with spoons and prayer. Rakes with identity crises. Rakes had one job, moving hay and detritus. But in winter, broken rakes transformed into snow scrapers, coal pokers, even makeshift shoes. The bent metal or splintered wood made them unreliable, but peasants embraced tool improvisation as both art and necessity. Multi-purpose masterpieces. Brooms weren't just for sweeping, they served as doorjamb defenders, boot scrubbers, and occasionally weapons in rat duels. A good broom got a name. A terrible broom got blamed for bad luck. Ice-cracking contraptions. Since ice was a daily menace, peasants forged iron shards into poking tools. These did the job, if not the honor. The most feared tool. The topik, a sharpened hook used for chipping frozen food and once, accidentally, a cousin's dignity. Tool storage. The snow pile. Tools weren't stored neatly. They were often buried beneath snowbanks, marked by a single stick or an accidental chicken. Losing a tool to the snow was a spiritual ordeal. Finding it again was grounds for a feastor, at least a celebratory grunt. Where some saw ruin, peasants saw resourcefulness. Every cracked bucket and crooked rake whispered resilience. Winter didn't care if your tools sparkled it, just cared whether you showed up swinging. Winter was cruel to all, but its grip didn't discriminate between species. For medieval peasants, animals weren't just food sources or laborers, they were co-survivors, huddled together in icy solidarity. And in the bleakest hours, the bleat of a goat or the cluck of a hen might be the only reminder that life still stirred beneath the snow. Chickens, the feathered alarm clocks. Chickens rarely laid eggs in winter, yet were kept warm in straw-lined crates near the hearths, sometimes even under beds. They acted as miniature heaters, trading warmth for crumbs. Their muttered clucks were interpreted as gossip and warnings from the spirit world. Occasionally, a bold hen perched atop a sleeping peasant, leading to legends of the feathered protector against night demons. Goats. The woolly therapist's goats endured the cold with stubborn resilience. Their milk was thin, but their presence was thick with emotional support. They followed peasants inside, slept in corners, and were known to nudge crying children gently with their snouts. Folk songs claimed a goat's bleat could call spring faster. Every baa was a desperate wish. Pigs, the grumpy furnace. If the family was lucky enough to have one, pigs helped warm the barn. Their body heat made them coveted companions. They were short-tempered in cold weather and known to scream when stepped on, leading to impromptu vocal concerts in the dark. Emotional entanglement. Children gave animals human names and whispered secrets to them. In harsh winters, goats and chickens were seen as listeners when even the adults stopped talking. If one died, mourning was deep and public. Wakes were held. Songs were sung. A chicken named Brunhilde once received a wreath of moss. Shared shelter strategy. Peasants often slept in the same quarters as their animals, not just out of practicality, but preference. Furs and straw couldn't match the warmth of a living body. Morning breath wasn't just from humans, it was a misty concert of cows, goats, dogs, and unrepentant pigs. In the storm's shadow, these creatures weren't just livestock. They were woven into the emotional fabric of daily survival. Where tools failed and people faltered, animals remained grumpy, smelly, loud and oddly comforting. When the snow sealed doors and frost blurred horizons, medieval peasants turned inward, not just into their homes, but into each other. Community wasn't optional. It was the firewall against despair. And nothing stoked that communal flame quite like gossip served warm. The village hearth mentality. Neighbors gathered in the largest homes, often ones with a central hearth and generous straw bedding. Personal space, laughable elbows, feet, goat saw, tangled in a cozy mess. Heat was shared like secrets. Huddling wasn't just for warmth, it was a ritual of belonging. Gossip as survival instinct. Gossip wasn't frivolous, was intelligence. Who had spare turnips? Who insulted the baker's bread as brick-like? Who saw Brother Martin tiptoe through the snow suspiciously barefoot? In a world without newspapers or indoor hobbies, rumors were the entertainment, the education, and the emotional glue. Games of the frozen imagination, children played finger games and invented contests based on icicle length, straw tosses, and pig mimicry. Adults preferred verbal sparring, debates over which saint was best at curing frostbite, or whether rain had a secret grudge against Farmer Eric's boots. Soup and secrets, communal meals doubled as truth-telling sessions. Someone stirred the pot, someone stirred drama. Recipes were shared, stolen, and exaggerated. Just a pinch of salt meant I stole it from the Lord's cellar. Tell no one. Emotional thermoregulation, laughter, even cruel laughter, helped regulate group morale. A good joke about the Reeves' missing eyebrows could warm a room better than firewood. Tears, too, were allowed. Stories of lost loved ones or vanished livestock made rounds and were met with quiet nods or unsolicited hugs. When winter starved the fields, peasants fed each other stories. The gossip was clumsy, the jokes recycled, but the warmth they wove was reland, vital. For the medieval peasant, snow wasn't just a nuisance. It was an unpredictable accomplice in life's daily absurdities. While treacherous in travel and merciless to crops, the snow occasionally offered twisted delight. It turned men into children and icy paths into arenas of chaotic sport. Snowball skirmishes. What began as harmless throwing of slush often escalated into legendary neighborhood conflicts. Peasants packed snowballs with alarming creativities, tones, twigs, and mystery bits added extra sting. Annual friendly feuds were fought near the tavern, with factions formed by livestock ownership or obscure family grudges. Slipping as spectacle, watching someone fall on ice became unofficial entertainment. Tall boots, clumsy gaits, and frozen puddles combined to deliver endless hilarity. A slip followed by a dramatic recovery often earned applause or a cabbage tossed in appreciation. Improvised sliding children turned barrel lids and broken furniture into sleds. Hills near the graveyard were popular, adding an extra thrill. Sliding past Grandpa Otto's final resting spot at alarming speed. Adults joined, not for sport, but out of desperation. If a broken wheelbarrow glided downhill faster than walking, that became transportation. Snow target challenges targets were carved from ice blocks and painted with berry juice. Points awarded for accuracy, creativity, and how close you came to hitting the Reeves pig. One infamous winter contest involved throwing snowballs at a mounted rooster statue, a challenge that lasted all season, ending only when the statue lost its head. Snow footprint tracking. Amateur tracking was a pastime. Identifying footprints became a guessing game. Was that Brother Martin, or some sort of human-duck hybrid? Secret lovers left trails, so decoding snowpaths became a local sport and scandal source. Despite the frostbite risk, snow carved out small patches of joy and chaos. It betrayed roads, buried tools, and froze stew midbowl. But sometimes it gave peasants something to laugh at that didn't cost a turnip. In the depths of medieval winter, roads, if they could even be called, that succumbed to snow, ice, and the occasional avalanche of despair. What passed for transportation became a frozen memory. Journeys halted. Letters were lost. Hope, like a wayward donkey, wandered off and didn't return until spring. Paths to nowhere, dirt roads, turned to mud, then to icy slabs of silence. Familiar tracks disappeared beneath snowfall, and villagers relied on guesswork and prayer to find the way to neighboring hamlets. Bridges froze, cracked, or collapsed under the weight of frost. One famous crossing was replaced with a confidence plank laid over water and superstition, animal guidance and betrayal. Donkeys and mules, the GPS of the peasantry, often refused to walk in winter conditions, or just the path of someone else equally lost. Letters and longings, messages between villages depended on brave or reckless young runners. One boy delivered a note 3 miles, only to discover it was a love letter to someone who had already died of frostbite. Miscommunication was rampant. A request for more grain became more gray when smeared ink met shaking hands. Impromptu detours. Villagers took to marking safe paths with bundles of sticks or blessed chicken feathers. Some paths led somewhere useful. Others ended at inexplicable circles of disturbed snow, rumored to be the footprints of wandering saints. Getting lost became a winter tradition. Stories circulated of accidental visits to rival villages, resulting in both unexpected romance and minor warfare. Home as haven. With roads gone, home became everything. Trade slowed, news vanished, and visitors dwindled to legends. The winter mantra was whispered in every hearthlit room. If the road won't take you there, don't go looking. The disappearance of roads marked a psychological freeze as much as a physical one. Town boundaries tightened, and the outside world became myth. Yet, within these icy isolations, the bonds of family and neighbor burned brighter, because the only way forward was inward. Just when peasants thought winter had wrung them dry, it began to melt. But thaw didn't mean relief, meant mud. Relentless, personality-soaking mud. The frozen grip loosened its hold only to hand villagers over to a soggy chaos that smelled faintly of regret and onions. The Great Slop Awakening. Roads turned from icy nothingness into sticky trapdoors. A single misstep could remove a boot and, sometimes dignity, with shocking speed. Mud crept indoors. Thatched walls wept moisture. Straw floors congealed, and even sleeping spots squished ominously when stepped on. Animals in existential crisis, chickens, refused to walk, opting to perch dramatically on fence posts and judge passersby. Goats tried mud-jumping competitions with little success and considerable splatter. Pigs thrived. This was their season. They bathed, wallowed, and philosophized from puddles like swamp-bound sages. Impossible cleanliness, peasants mopped endlessly with wet rags that made no impact. Mud was not a substance, it was a personality, and it had a vendetta. Cloaks were hung, rehung, and eventually surrendered to the mud gods. One woman declared her garments too burdened with history to save. Travel becomes theater. Visiting another cottage became an expedition. Peasants wrapped their feet in turnip sacks and walked like mystics, balancing on invisible paths. Every splash triggered storytelling. "I fell here once" became both a warning and a bonding experience. Hope as a dirty whisper, despite the filth. Mud whispered of growth. Shoots emerged defiantly. Moss crept like optimism. Birds returned and sang absurdly cheerful songs to peasants still ankle-deep in sludge. Children made spring charms from muddy twigs and declared themselves keepers of thaw magic. Mud season was the encore no one asked for, but everyone endured. It was messy, inconvenient, and weirdly poetic, because after the silence of snow, even squelch was a form of applause. In a world where frozen fingers and numb toes were as common as gossip and goats, medieval peasants did what humans do best. They invented rituals, strange, stirring, and sometimes spectacularly pointless. These customs served one key purpose: to trick body and soul into forgetting how miserably cold everything was. Circles of movement. Walking in slow circles became an unofficial ceremony. Participants claimed it was for warmth and warding off frost spirits, though it mostly caused dizziness and accidental collisions. Children created games where you couldn't stop moving, even during meals. One girl famously spilled stew on her foot and declared it an anointing. Candle games. Lighting candles wasn't just for illumination, it became symbolic. Peasants would whisper to the flame, asking it to remember their warmth and betray winter. Blowing out a candle after a spoken wish was said to banish frost from one toe for one night. Possibly coincidence, likely desperation. Sokluk ceremonies. Warm socks were rare, so peasants made a ritual of gifting mismatched ones to loved ones. The more absurd the pairing, the more likely the wearer would survive till spring. Supposedly, lost socks were mourned with dramatic flair. A minor funeral might be held. Tears may or may not have been for the sock alone. Toasts and odd offerings. Burnt bread was placed on windowsills to distract the winter spirits with culinary confusion. It rarely worked, but became tradition. Peasants toasted the cold itself, mockingly, to thee, biting wind. May your cruelty be soggy come dawn. Dramatic frostbite charades. Some villages developed frostbite theater, reenacting imaginary courtroom. Scenes where a peasant would sue the winter for damages. Costumes involved cloaks of straw and exaggerated shivering. Winning arguments included, "I once sneezed icicles, and my nose has gone rogue." Rituals didn't cure frostbite, but they gave suffering a rhythm and misery a stage. In these acts of whimsy and warmth-seeking nonsense, peasants found power in playproof that even the cold couldn't freeze their spirits solid. Winter didn't just bite at flesh, it gnawed at minds. Day after day of overcast skies and cold winds turned spirits as soggy as the landscape. While kings worried about rebellions, peasants wrestled with a slow rebellion of the soul. Seasonal gloom, so potent, it shaped their dreams, their moods, and their poetry about wet socks. Dreams drenched in gray. With little sunlight, sleep stretched longer and deeper. Peasants often reported dreams of wandering foggy fields or arguing with talking. Snowmen both considered omens of melancholy or indigestion. One village healer claimed that cloud-heavy dreams bring wisdom, but also mustaches. The latter part was never adequately explained. Melancholy manuscripts. Medieval poets embraced the gloom with lines like, "Thy breath, O winter, sucketh joy like leeches from my bosom." Subtle it was not. Common themes included lost warmth, damp regrets, and longing for socks that didn't squelch. Some even composed tolements, miniature poems for frost-bitten digits, mood remedies, and quirks. Peasants invented joy-stoking, a process involving telling jokes to logs before burning them. The happier the log, the brighter the flamor, so they believed. Singing summer is Ikemen in, while wearing mittens was said to summon cheer. In truth, it mostly muffled the sound. Grayness and groupthink, gloom blurred decision. Entire villages once agreed to name all livestock Snowball just to keep things simple. Debates took on a dreamy haze. One chronicler recorded an argument about whether sneezing was nature's way of reminding us we still feel. The psychological toll wasn't just gloom, it was a kind of poetic hysteria, where the sky's unchanging gray seeped into thoughts and tales. Yet out of the fog came folklore, empathy, and perhaps the most powerful rebellion of all, storytelling that fought off despair, one bizarre stanza at a time. When snowdrifts swallowed roads and carts froze mid-journey, medieval peasants turned to a beloved pastime, bending the rules to survive. With markets inaccessible and supplies scarce, they didn't wait for spring, they schemed. From bootleg turnip swaps to covert oat deals, winter was high season for frosty enterprise. Hidden trade routes, paths through woods or frozen fields became unofficial snow tunnels, guided by lanterns hung from goats. The goats weren't great navigators, but added flair. Deals were struck under ice-covered bridges. A fish for a blanket, a squirrel pelt for dried plums. Everything was negotiable, except the bridge toll. Underground barter networks. Villages developed silent bartering. One family left goods in a barn. Another snuck in and replaced them with their own wares. It was like a wintertime secret Santex. With onions, goods grew wildly, misnamed to dodge taxes. Honey became bee broth. Wine was grape remorse. Socks, foot prisons, smuggling with sass. Pigs were wrapped in straw and declared rolling hay reserves. It fooled no one, but amused everyone. Children were used as distraction squads, singing loud songs while deals went down behind the barn. One song, "O Turnip Mine," became a legend. Creative currencies. When coins froze together, peasants switched to alternative currency. Dried mushrooms, smooth rocks, and favors like, "I'll shovel your snow if you give me that fermented cabbage." One farmer supposedly bought a shovel using a story so compelling the merchant cried and handed it over. Local laws, more like guidelines, snow-based loopholes, emerged. If it was snowing during the trade, laws became theoretical. One elder declared winter a season of interpretive ethics. Some villages staged mock trials, where a hen defended her right to trade eggs for scarf scraps. She won. In winter's grip, peasants became inventors of frost-powered economics, resourceful, irreverent, and just a bit rebellious. What the crown called illegal, they called extremely necessary improvisation with flair. In the medieval cold, desperation bred innovation and wild ideas. Peasants tried anything and everything to chase warmth, from the eccentric to the outright baffling. Many of these strategies shared one fatal flaw. They did absolutely nothing. But hope flickers where fire fails, and so the legends grew. Hot rocks, stones were heated in fire, then carried in pockets. But by the time someone said, "Ah, that's better," the heat was gone, and the pebble just felt judgmental. Flat rocks were strapped to backs like armor. One peasant reportedly said, "I feel heroic." He was not. He was cold and bleeding from a pebble. Loud humming villagers gathered to hum in unison, claiming vibrations kept them warm. It may have kept wolves away, but warmth, not so much. One elder claimed, "The warmth comes from within." Another replied, "Then why are we turning blue from without?" Duck-shaped soup bowls. Ducks were seen as symbols of cozy wetness. Bowls shaped like ducks became prized possessions. Soup tasted no better and cooled just as fast, but spirits were briefly buoyant. One bowl had wings that flapped when touched. It confused the dog and delighted the blacksmith. Did it help? Not even a little. Warm thoughts. Just think of the sun, people said. Remember last July. Others responded by crying in hay. Some tried writing warmth-themed poems and reading them aloud to firewood. The wood remained stoically unburnt, hugging warm objects. Soup, pots, goats, and even overly toasted bread were hugged with enthusiasm. Burns ensued. The bread was mostly soggy. Peasants created hug stations where one could embrace a barrel for 3 minutes. The warmth, questionable. The social bonding, surprisingly effective. These were not effective remedies, but they were fierce attempts to reclaim dignity in a world of slush and sniffles. Maybe warmth was less about heat and more about connection, creativity, and the shared delusion that duck bowls made things better. As the snow receded and the earth turned to glorious sludge, something stirred in the hearts of medieval peasants. Romance squelched its way into season. Mud might have been everywhere, but so was yearning, and thus began the awkward, soggy courtships known as thaw love, serenades in slop. Suitors sang to beloveds across puddle-ridden meadows. Lyrics often included lines like "Your eyes shine like unfrozen wells," or "I.D. Wade, a swamp for thee." Singing while standing in a barrel was considered gallant. It rarely improved the tune, but it kept the singer slightly cleaner. Mud puddle proposals. Proposing with a kneel in mud was symbolic. "I lower myself before thee, even unto the muck." The sincerity was admired. The laundry was not. One famous proposal involved carving initials into a mud pie and flinging it at the beloved's door. She accepted after scraping it off the goat. Gifting seasonally appropriate tokens. Flower garlands were unavailable, so lovers exchanged squelchy moss wreaths or bundles of twigs tied with damp string. A popular gift, a single dry sock, presented with poetry and the promise of sharing the other when wed. The soggy dance of desire spring festivals included mud waltzing, where couples danced in the wet fields. Falling was expected. So was laughter and flirtatious finger-pointing. The rare double leap was believed to predict how harmonious their marriage would be. Misfires and misunderstandings. One peasant misheard kiss in the puddle as fist in the puddle and ruined 3 courtships before anyone corrected him. Confessions of love were often muffled by splash or barnyard chaos. One lover shouted, "You make my heart gallop," and was answered by a donkey. Despite the mire, love found its wagrity, giddy, gloriously inelegant. In the thaw, affection rose like steam from slush, proving that even mud can host a miracle when hearts are warm enough. In an era when bathwater froze before your second toe dipped in and soap was rarer than warm bread, medieval peasants leaned on other ways to stay clean, or, more accurately, to appear less pungent while embracing the glorious illusion of freshness. Hygiene became an art of survival, strategy, and selective sniffing. The power of the nap. Napping under straw wasn't just cozy, it was believed to soak up unpleasantness. One farmer claimed hay reset his aroma. His family disagreed. Midday naps were endorsed as scent resets. Wake up, sniff yourself, move on, showering. Optional to mythical. Aromatic illusions. Peasants wore herb satchels, other natural odors. One popular invention was the nose bouquet, small flowers tucked near the nostrils. Effective? No. Fashionable? Questionable. Dry cleansing rituals, rubbing with salt or ashes, was considered cleansing. It exfoliated skin and pride simultaneously. Some used bread crusts to scrub dirt. A monk once declared, "What feeds the soul can scour the flesh." His skin looked haunted. Communal cleansing, creativity, family foot washing circles became bonding moments. You'd scrub your neighbor's toes while singing songs like "Oh Sweet Scentless Dawn." Laundry day was also body washing day. If your clothes were wet, why not jump in to bath? Myths and avoidance. Many believed water opened the body to evil spirits. Hence, bathing was done sparingly, like confessions or honest tax declarations. One village declared rain-free cleanliness, encouraging people to dance nude for righteousness. The results were chafing and local scandals. Despite the questionable methods and rare lather, peasants found dignity in doing what they could with creativity, humor, and a hint of denial. Cleanliness may have been mythical, but smelling slightly less terrible was a communal triumph. In the frigid lands of medieval winter, warmth wasn't just comfort, it was currency. As supplies dwindled and nights grew longer, villagers discovered that heat could be ... relocated. Welcome to the age of blanket conspiracies, mittens gone missing, and revenge naps. Mitten mysteries. Mittens vanished like secrets. One day they were drying by the hearth, the next worn by Brother Alric for reasons both spiritual and chilly. Lost mittens were rarely returned. Instead, poems were written to them, like the tragic ballad, "O Thumbless Journey." Blanket bartering blankets were hoarded, hidden, and sometimes boasted about. A prized quilt, stitched from rabbit fur, and stubborn optimism made its way through 4 households never officially traded, just mysteriously borrowed. Peasants negotiated blanket sharing like diplomats. Deals included straw payments, storytelling taxes, or 3 hugs not wet, revenge naps, and cozy espionage. If someone was caught stealing warmth, justice was served via revenge nap, deliberately taking all the warmth, leaving the thief shivering in moral reflection. One woman trained her goat to sleep beside her as a heat barrier. The goat became a local hero, and later, a weather forecaster. Rotational heating rituals. In larger homes, warmth sharing was democratic. People rotated sleeping spots near the fire, managed by a self-appointed heat steward. Violating the schedule was a crime known as hearth hogging. Punishment: sleeping near the door with a bucket of ice for company. Theft of flame. Entire candles were smuggled from one house to another under cloaks, described as flame relocation or ember migration. One villager bragged about stealing warmth from the Lord's sermon by sitting closest to the altar candles and subtly leaning in. Warmth was never just physical. Every stolen quilt, every mysteriously vanished sock told a tale of human need with a dash of theatrical mischief. As the chill reluctantly loosened its grip, a single brave sprout cracked the earth, and with it erupted an avalanche of gossip. Spring wasn't here yet, but hope dressed up early and paraded through the village like it had a floral mandate. The prophecy of the dripping icicle. One villager claimed to see the Virgin Mary's silhouette in a melting icicle. Others said it looked like a turnip. Either way, spring fever hit. The drip seer began issuing weather predictions by sniffing puddles. Accuracy arguable, confidence unshaken. Avian ambassadors of false hope. A bird chirped before dawn and instantly triggered a picnic. The frostbite that followed was quietly edited out of the story. Rumors of migrating geese caused several false goose chases, including one where a man followed feathers for 4 miles. They were chicken feathers, fashion forward, frost backward. Young romantics swapped out boots for sandals and cloaks for floral capes. Several fainted from hypothermia but looked seasonally stunning. One woman invented hope gloves, mittens with finger holes, to feel the optimism with my fingertips. Songs of premature bloom bard Alfie debuted his seasonal hit, Thaw Me Maybe. It featured lyrics about sunburns, rain dances, and kissing with pollen. Children created a game called Mud Splash Diplomacy, which resolved snowball feuds with dirt truce ceremonies. The Great Forecast Scandal. The town's official weather scroll was exposed as fiction written by a dreamer who mistook his chicken's sneeze for thunder. A council was formed to oversee seasonal declarations, requiring 2 confirmed buds and a verified sneeze of joy. Spring didn't arrive immediately, but the people behaved as if it had danned. Maybe that's the point. Optimism doesn't wait for permission. As the stars stitch silver dreams across the sky and the moon hums its lullaby to the sleepy world, the night tiptoes in, wrapping us in quiet comfort. Your thoughts deserve rest, your heart a soft pillow of peace. So close your eyes, breathe gently, and let the hush of evening carry you far and safe. Good night. See you in the stories the morning hasn't told yet.